ZvP. There's a build that's quite common these days. It's Warp Prism, DT and or Archon drop. Part of the reason this opener is so strong is because the Archons can be dropped and then lifted back into the Warp Prism. They can kill workers, they can kill queens, they can kill overlords. This game was a pretty good example of the counter response to that. So in the early game, they blocked my natural, so I took my third, and then I'll take my natural when I can. If they're blocking your base like this, instead of taking the third at 20 supply, you can just make 2 queens. But the main meat and potatoes of this analysis is focused on the procedure to prepare for the DT and or Archon drop, and what the build looks like. So right now, I have 1 worker on gas, but mainly I'm focused on minerals. I made 4 Zerglings to defend the early adept, and then I'm making queens. Making up to around 5 to 7 queens is really nice against Protoss because it gives you a way to put pressure on a Warp Prism on your side of the map. If you only have 1 injecting queen per base, you're not going to have enough damage output to be able to push them away. They can just warp in at whatever base they want to. So I'm droning, 4-minute spores to be safe against Oracle and DT. I'm going for Lair with my next gas after ling speed. Lair is going to unlock roach speed, it also unlocks overseers. You can get these spores sniped some of the time, so getting a Lair just advances you along the Zerg tech tree. So let's see what I've scouted so far. I see the Dark Shrine, the Twilight, a base, Robo, several gates, a gas, and I had not seen a base yet, so their base is a little bit on the later side. So how am I going to prepare for this? The main idea is I want to establish a ring of vision outside my base, so I know the angle the Warp Prism is coming in. So these 3 overlords are doing great. It would be even better if I had 1 overlord right here. Once you scout that it's an Archon drop, overlord speed is really important for 2 reasons. The first reason is that overlord speed allows your overlords to fly away from the Archons and not get killed and keep filling vision on the map. Another reason is Dark Templar are faster than Overseers without the speed upgrade. So it's a double use to get overlord speed against the Archon drop opener. Your Overseers can keep up with DTs, and your overlords can keep away from the Archons. So my setup here is going to be some defensive queens and some defensive roaches, and then I still want to inject and drone. The Archon drop is very expensive, so if they're taking gases behind it as well, they're not going to immediately have a huge adept attack, and if they did attack with adepts, you would just make more roaches. But I'm taking my gases, trying to get full value for my 3 base saturation. Lair is done, I'm taking roach speed, spreading creep, macro hatch. The macro hatch I took mainly because the Archons could deny a 4th base at this stage, and I do want some larva. Roaches are pretty larva intensive. And then now, this is the most important read in the game for me. I know there's a 3rd base, but the opponent does not have gases. If the opponent doesn't have gases at a pretty reasonable time, and you already have gases mining, usually they can hit some pretty strong timing. So they have their main saturated, their natural saturated, and their 3rd base is mostly saturated for minerals, but their gases are on the late side. So I was thinking, alright, if they're in Dark Templar tech, they have Archons, that's a lot of gas, which you could say all of that gas spent into the Archon drop can't be immortals. So roaches are better than if Protoss went for double robo immortal production right here. It also allows me to secure a 4th base. If they go for a timing, a Roach Ravager army is going to be better fighting straight up against Archons than Ling Bane. Lings are directly countered by Archons. Banelings are also directly countered by Archons. Hydras can be bad if Archons get on top of the Hydras. So I decided to just make units off of 3 base saturation. I have 66 drones, a 4th base. My Hydrogen is on the way, so I have something to fall back on. My +1 range is going. And then here, I have a nice sturdy Roach Ravager army against 4 Archons, 2 Immortals, and 4 Zealots, and an Adept. You can very easily imagine, if you had a Ling Bane army here, you're pretty much dead. The best option for a Ling Bane player might be some Spines and then counterattacking, because almost all of the units in this army will counter Lings and Banes, but Roach Ravager is pretty sturdy against it. One thing that could be a little bit different in this case, so right here I'm munching this army and then pushing back across the map, but say for example I took a little bit more damage to the Archon drop. I would be more just defending here and holding that ground. In this case, because the Archon drop did almost no damage, I'm able to punish this push and then push back myself and remax with a bunch of units. A really risky aspect of going for an Archon timing is Archons are slow and expensive. So if they go across the map, when they're retreating, as you can see here, they're going to lose most of them. So I can take another upgrade behind it. Flooding Lings is also pretty good behind an attack. Even though they're going Archon, making Lings allows me to make more Ravagers in my army. Don't forget to rebuild Overseers with your push. A lot of times if they're getting desperate, they see you have the stronger army, they'll focus the Overseer, and then just warp in a bunch of DTs and then you have to retreat. So make an Overseer, make a second Overseer. If you lose an Overseer, make another one. Try to inject. But yeah, Roach Ravager is going to be a really sturdy composition if they're going heavy into Archon, which means they're going to be lighter on Immortals if their economy is on the lower side. And then around this stage of the game, usually you'll be transferring workers. So I didn't drone much more. I just transferred half of my workers from the main base to the 4th base. Because it's mining out, might as well get some value from that 4th base location. One trick that I didn't do this game, but you can sometimes use, is if you have a bunch of Overseers because they went DT and you have energy, you can contaminate the Robo. That's pretty good. Robotics units are generally really strong, so preventing Protoss from having as many of those is a nice maneuver if you have the Overseers anyway. Some follow-ups to this, you could go for Lurker. Lurker would be a really sturdy unit to fall back on. One thing that I've been using with Lurker to pose threats on the Protoss side of the map is Nidus. Lurkers are pretty bad at just walking across the map and going for attacks unless you just have a huge army lead. So you can use a Nidus network to say Nidus 3 or 4 Lurkers and then a bunch of Lings, and pretty much deny mining from base for a long time. Yeah, that was the basic response to the Archon Prism attack into an Archon attack follow-up. Wait, what?